right, folks, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online. Number 38, I am your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm very excited to hop in with you on this Thursday evening after the Denver Nuggets schedule was just released. The entire NBA schedule dropped by the NBA and the TNT powers that be ABC, ESPN. Interesting to think about it that this will be TNT's last year in all likelihood. So those games suddenly slightly more valuable, I have to imagine, just the way that things are going to go with that crew. Going to get interviewed by Charles Barkley and Shaquille O'Neal and Ernie Johnson and guys like that for players at the end of the game. So you might see some sappy comments from players at that point, but should be an interesting way to go. Again, I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Really appreciate all the love and support on the podcast, especially over this off season. If you can, please leave a like and subscribe to the video. Would genuinely appreciate it as I continue to work against the grain, trying to give you this awesome Denver Nuggets coverage. Like and subscribe. And if you're on the audio side, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That would be great. Real quick, before we go any further, this podcast, as you know, it's brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for everything that you need wise, and they are giving you some great deals. Sorry, I didn't have my copy pulled up. Wanted to make sure I've got everything here. From the preseason for the NFL to college kicking off, everything is rounding into form for the football season this year. BetOnline is your number one source for everything football. Think you got your stuff? Get in on the winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game's over, head in on their online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with some of their slots games. Head on over to the website today and use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, and get in on the action. BetOnline. The game starts here. You can also find that linked in the description below if you are interested. Okay. Again, thank you so much for hopping in. Really appreciate it. Will's here. What's up, Will? Thanks for hopping in as always, my guy. I'll make sure to get you and Grace on at some point, whether it's together or separately. We'll definitely do a show together. That'll be fun. Let's talk about the schedule. This will be a shorter episode. I'm going to do more schedule logistics in the first segment, and then second segment, we will do 10 best games on the Nuggets schedule as I sort of advertise that for this podcast. Schedule logistics to start. Denver's got 22 total national games this year, which is the same as last year. And then plus any additional games that they're going to get from the NBA Cup. They've got 7 games that will be played on TNT, 11 on ESPN, and 4 on ABC. Not sure what the actual breakdown is for other teams for TNT. I remember Denver having a little bit more of an even disparity between ESPN and TNT games last year, just in doing this entire exercise last year as well. But this year, fewer TNT games and a lot more ESPN and ABC games for sure. The 4 games on ABC are actually really interesting. I wanted to bring those up specifically because that is generally the NBA's way of saying you are a featured product. You are a featured team for us. And they're the premier spot. That's where the NBA finals are shown every single year on ABC. And you get the 4 games on the network this year. Denver had 2 last year. And so I think it is a sign of respect that Denver has played well on national TV. They give fans a show. Nikola Jokic is obviously worldwide viewing at this point. Denver's going to play Minnesota on January 25th, the Lakers on February 22nd, the Boston Celtics on March 2nd, and Oklahoma City on March 9th. All of those games will be on ABC, and all of them should be good, barring injury or various absence or anything like that. I'm very curious to see how Denver handles that. Frankly, I wrote about this. I talked about this. Very curious to see how Denver handles their schedule and handles their stars from a rest perspective. But one of the new things that the NBA is doing this year that they haven't done in previous seasons is they are not allowing a game to be played immediately on the day before a large national game, like a nationally televised game that a team is going to be featured on. There will be no games before that. There will be no days before that that should be taken up by anything other than travel. And that is, I think, a really impressive step for the NBA. It's certainly feedback that they had. It's one of the pieces of feedback that I know that the Coaches Association and the players have given to the league is that, hey, we always have to make sure, because the rules say that you have to play your stars if they are healthy for those games. Between that and the 65 game rule, and then games that were immediately before or after it, usually team schedules can get kind of wonky a little bit around those national games. So sounds like the NBA is trying to standardize that going forward. And I think that that is a great thing. That is something that will help those national games become better, or at least that's the expectation going in. Whether it actually happens, who knows? Denver's got 16 back-to-backs this year. The average for all teams is only 14.9. I think that's according to Tim Reynolds of AP. He's a very well-respected writer, had no reason to make up a statistic like that. I think he probably found it from the NBA releasing something official. So the average is 14.9, but Denver's got 16. I think that ties for the most into the NBA. What gives? Like, why would that be? Well, I think part of it has to do with the national games that Denver's going to be a part of. Not every team that's on national schedule is going to have back-to-backs, is going to have like a bunch of crazy travel schedules. Like, I think the Lakers have 13 back-to-backs. I think the Warriors have 14 back-to-backs. So this isn't like an excuse or anything, because those teams should have more back-to-backs given that they play in California and are nearer to other teams. Denver has 16 games on back-to-backs, and that to me seems pretty high. But the NBA did do Denver a little bit of a favor, where the average seed that will be facing the Denver Nuggets this year on those back-to-backs is 10.0. And what I mean by that is I took whatever seed that team finished with, like, so they're playing Detroit in 2 separate back-to-backs this year. So they get a 15 because they were the 15th seed in the Eastern Conference. They get 15. So Denver's average seed that they play is 10.0, which is pretty low. You would think it's around in between 1 and 15, about 7.5, 8-ish. 7 of those games that they're facing of the 16 are against playoff or play-in teams. So only 7 are against a top 10 seed, and 9 are against non-playoff seeds, which I thought was very interesting. I don't know if it's better or worse. There is a school of thought that says you kind of just punt on the back-to-backs. You don't necessarily have to worry about those if they are good, especially if they're against good teams. And Denver doesn't have to face a lot of good teams. I think they face OKC one time. But the funny thing is, OKC will also be facing the Nuggets on a second night of a back-to-back that night, because they play each other in OKC on March 9th and March 10th, which I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before. So the NBA is doing a favor to the Nuggets, I think. They're, at least with the number of back-to-backs that they have to play, the number of air miles they have to travel. Those are unfortunate factors, but I think because of the teams that they're playing on those back-to-backs, they'll be okay. But they will have to try. They will have to try to be good on those back-to-backs. They just may have to do it without all of their stars. Like, I think it's a good idea to rest Jokic or Murray or Porter or Gordon on various back-to-backs this year. Jokic he did it 2 or 3 times last year, and then Murray was obviously out for extended periods of time. Gordon and Porter were never out for extended periods of time, except Gordon had one stretch, I think in December or something like that, where he missed some time and then the Nuggets had to recover from it. It wasn't anything crazy. And then Peyton Watson actually got some good run during that stretch. I don't think Denver really struggled that much. But the point being, Denver's going to have to get more creative with how they rest because they have 16 back-to-backs. That's about 20% of their schedule. And they're going to have to figure out how to do it correctly because you lose KCP, you kind of upset the apple cart a little bit with your rotation. You got to find new players that can play. Julian Strother, welcome to the heavy rotation for those games in particular. That is a great time to get some run for him. And for Peyton Watson, he could be starting in some of those circumstances. It wouldn't surprise me if Russell Westbrook started in some of those circumstances for Jamal Murray. And we'll just have to see what ultimately becomes of it. But fortunately, they should have enough games against Charlotte, Detroit, San Antonio in those circumstances that they should be okay. Denver's got 2 5-game homestands. They've got 1 5-game road trip. The 5-game homestands, there's one in November. That's pretty early on. It's a relatively standard one. You've got some good teams, some bad teams that are mixed in there. OKC and Dallas are mixed in. Toronto and Utah are mixed in. That's pretty standard. The March one has Chicago, Milwaukee, Utah, Minnesota, and San Antonio. So it's a little bit worse, a little bit of a worse overall grouping there. Minnesota will obviously be pretty tough. I think that's a very important game on Denver's schedule. But Denver does the only games on that one that are a back-to-back are the Minnesota and San Antonio games where Minnesota's the front end. So expect Denver on that back end of the back-to-back to probably rest a player or two. And then last thing probably, let's just see Grace is in here. Last thing probably I'll talk about for the logistics section, the in-season tournament. Now they're calling it the NBA Cup, the Emirates NBA Cup, if you feel so inclined, which I'm not sure how I feel about it, but the NBA is doing it, so I guess we got to go forward. The NBA Cup, if you looked at the schedule that I posted on my Twitter earlier today, there's a yellow box that is highlighted in the middle of December, from December 10th to December 17th, basically, where every team is going to play 2 games during that stretch, but some teams will be in the NBA Cup knockout rounds, or they will be just playing regular season games that are seeded based off of the group play that they were in. I don't know if it's good. I don't know if it's bad. I know that last year Denver didn't make the knockout round, and it was because they didn't have Jamal Murray for at least one of those games. I remember the New Orleans game, they didn't have him, and I don't think they had him for the Houston game either. The ones that they did have him, I thought that they won, but I could be wrong about that. Not necessarily the best bracket that Denver has. They're facing, by the looks of it, New Orleans, Memphis, Dallas, and Golden State. More on some of those games in just a little bit, but for those that are confused, Denver will play 2 games in that stretch. The only reason they wouldn't play 2 games in that stretch is if they had the knockout bracket and they made it to the championship game, in which they play an 83rd regular season game, which happened last year between the LA Lakers and the Indiana Pacers. And it was fine. It was an interesting game. I think it told some interesting stories, but nothing that really defined the regular season by any means, or let alone the playoffs. Neither of those. Indiana had a good run, to be clear, in the playoffs, but it wasn't that crazy. Or did they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals? Who made it to the Eastern Conference Finals? It was Boston versus, I know they faced Boston at one point, but gosh, I don't remember. Somebody smart in the chat, tell me. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to chat about the top 10 games that I have on the Denver Nuggets regular season standing. Should be very fun. I'm looking forward to taking it through the schedule. But first, got to mention number 38. who are doing great work partnering with Mile High Sports, with Denver Stiffs, basically anybody that wants to host a watch party. Mile High Sports, we want to host watch parties, especially during Bronco season. So, Bronco season coming up very, very soon. I'm sure you'll be able to find some Mile High Sports watch parties, some getaway or like giveaways, excuse me, and then some awesome deals they'll get for beer, for the wristbands that they provide out, anything that makes it easier to have fun, to enjoy life, to watch the game. You can get that at number 38 in Rhino. If you ever get there, let them know that you came from us here over at Mile High Sports. All right, we're back. Second segment here, and also final segment for Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show tonight. Brief one today. I obviously the schedule drop is it's important and not important at the same time, because everybody knew that you're going to face which teams you're going to end up facing. But I do think that the order matters, and I do think that the way that the league tries to push certain matchups, I think matters too. And we'll talk about how and why in just a little bit. What's up, CT? Good to see you. But yeah, this should be an interesting time for these Denver Nuggets. I want to go over the 10 best games on the Nuggets schedule chronologically. Let me take it with you. Let me take you with me on the chronological best games for the Denver Nuggets, starting with Thursday, October 24th, the opening night game against the Oklahoma City Thunder on TNT. Denver doesn't play any games before that. The season will tip off officially on Tuesday. Boston will get their rings on ring night. The Lakers will obviously play because they clearly deserve it. And then games will happen on Wednesday, but Denver and OKC will not play until Thursday, which is good. That is a good thing. Denver will be one of the only teams that plays on Thursday. They'll get that night basically to themselves, and that should be fun. That should be a fun environment for them. And it should be a fun environment for OKC, where they deserve to be showcased a little bit. They will go into Denver. OKC is going to be a held team to play. Like, that's going to be a really tough matchup. Although maybe having Isaiah Hartenstein actually helps Denver a little bit, because that's a player that Jokic can guard. Whether he guards him extremely well or not, I don't know. But you don't want Jokic chasing out 40% three-point shooters or being dunked on by super athletes. Fortunately, Hartenstein, though he is very good, is neither of those things. And the chemistry is probably going to be a little bit iffy there. Number 2, Friday, November 22nd, Denver's first national NBA Cup game. That'll be against the Dallas Mavericks, and that'll be on ESPN. Dallas is a fascinating team. They lost Derek Jones Jr. I think they brought back Dante Exum, though I don't remember. They got Klay Thompson, who is in a different stage of his career, obviously, than he was with the Warriors. He got a lot of open shots with the Warriors, but he also got a lot of contested shots with the Warriors. And his burdens for that team were not as high as you would think. Like, Steph carried a very heavy burden, but Golden State was always trying to make things easier for Klay. And Klay missed a lot of shots in a lot of important moments. It doesn't mean that he's cooked. It doesn't mean that he's washed. I assume that he'll play, and I assume that he'll start in between Luka and Kyrie. And that should be fascinating to watch. I don't know how they're going to build their lineups, but Luka finding Klay, that's going to be a tough one. there's a lot of offensive threats there. And then you have Lively rolling to the rim. Like, that is going to be a game where Dallas scores 130 points, and Denver's going to need to score 131, 100%. Next, Tuesday, December 3rd, my birthday, NBA Cup game versus Golden State, the aforementioned Golden State Warriors on TNT. I mentioned this on the last podcast, but getting to watch Steph in the Olympics just show out the way that he did in the semifinals and the gold medal game was super sick. Like that was a really, really interesting situation, opportunity, like where Steve Kerr had been featuring him for the entire time, keeping him out there, doing everything that he could to keep Steph in a position where he could succeed. And then Steph found a way to really get himself going and just was dropping peas in the ocean by the end of it. Not many more Steph Curry showcase games, I'm going to imagine, like between the Nuggets and the Warriors. Like, we'll see what happens. Draymond Green will probably play, and he'll play a big role against Jokic. Golden State is in a different era now than they were before, but that is an NBA Cup game. That could be an opportunity. It's the final one of the group play for Denver, so that could determine whether Denver gets to the elimination bracket or not. Not that I think it matters that much, but those are important games for Denver from a seeding perspective, so you just can't drop the random ones. So that'll be a big one. That'll be a fun one. December 3rd, mark it down. Number 4, Christmas Day on Christmas, 12/25, Wednesday, at the Phoenix Suns on TNT. That is not the first time that the Nuggets will face the Phoenix Suns. That'll be actually in the preseason where they face them on Sunday, October 13th. That'll be when Kevin Durant comes to town and he gets to hear it from Nuggets fans because he was such a wild guy. But yeah, that'll be a fun one. That'll be an interesting one. Those games are always very competitive because the Suns have something to prove pretty much every single time. Yusuf Nurkic is always out for blood against Denver. Devin Booker is always looking to kill. And then Kevin Durant, the last time he came to Denver, he dominated in an overtime game and was very, very good in that one. And Aaron Gordon couldn't stop him. Nobody could stop him for Denver. So that's going to be really interesting. The Nuggets have to... That could be a Peyton Watson showcase game. That I'll put it here. That'll be a Peyton Watson showcase game. That is my official prediction. Fun Christmas game. Fun Christmas opportunity. That's the nightcap, by the way. That's an 8:30 tip Mountain Time. So keep that in mind if you're on the East Coast. And if you're going to the game in Phoenix, good for you. That'll be fun. That'll be hopefully good weather. Number 5, I picked 2 matchups, actually. January 7th and March 2nd, both against the Boston Celtics. One of them's on TNT. One of them's on ABC. Showcase games between the 2023 NBA champion and the 2024 NBA champion. Those games last year against Boston were epic, and I have no reason to doubt that they'll be good this time around too. And the NBA, I think, agrees. TNT and ABC. That's the right... I think, idea that the NBA has. They want those games to matter, and I think they will matter in the grand scheme of things. The Nuggets are probably going to be in the top 4. Boston's probably going to win another 55, 60 games, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they handle themselves, how they handle this after the championship. Could be a nice opportunity to compare and contrast to how the Nuggets handle themselves. And it could be an opportunity for Denver to showcase that they are not entirely dead when it comes to championship contention. Like, they obviously got bounced last year. Things haven't looked good in this offseason. They'll have an opportunity over the course of this regular season to prove it consistently night in and night out. And that could be one of those opportunities for sure. Number 6, January 21st, Jokic versus Embiid in Denver on TNT. What's interesting about this, and I really do think that the NBA did this on purpose. The Nuggets have played in Philly before Philly has played in Denver. I think like 3 or 4 times in a row. I don't remember the last time that Philly actually played in Denver first. And so it's given Embiid an opportunity to suit up for the first Jokic-Embiid matchup, where he's just playing in the home court and feeling very comfortable. The games go a certain way. Embiid has his dominant stretches, and it just looks like he is a better player than Jokic in some of those matchups specifically. And then the Denver matchup comes around, and we never get to see the other side of the coin. Well, now, January 21st, Denver plays Philly. January 31st, Philly plays Denver in Philly. So that'll be a fascinating one. I'm curious to see how that ultimately comes about. Like, will there be an excuse? Will there be an actual injury? Will there be the normal wear and tear? It's a national game, so I don't think that there's any reason that there's a back to back before or after it. So I don't know. We will have to find out, but I'm very curious to see how the Sixers, how Philly, how Embiid, and then how the Nuggets handle that. I think they'll try to take that one pretty seriously. Number 7, January 25th, rivalry week. The Philly versus Denver in Philly game on January 31st is actually a part of rivalry week as well. But rivalry week starts with Minnesota, I believe. Or does it end? Like, is it, am I doing the wrong thing? I think I might be doing the wrong thing and flipping them. But Denver will play rivalry week at Minnesota on ABC. That'll be a rematch, obviously, of last year's conference semifinals. And that's going to be fun. That's going to be a good one. Denver obviously has a lot to prove in that matchup. I think Jamal Murray specifically has a lot to prove in that matchup. Minnesota, though, they've still got 3 elite on-ball defenders in Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, and Nikhil Alexander-Walker. So we will see if Jamal can handle that. That'll be very interesting. That is on the front end of Denver's 5-game road trip, I believe. Number 8, Thursday, February 27th, the Nuggets play at Milwaukee against the Bucks on TNT. And the reason I picked this one, I think this is the first national game that Jokic and Giannis have actually faced each other. I could be wrong about that, but I've watched those guys for a long time, and I've seen a lot. Like, I guess NBA TV counts for some people. It doesn't count for me. I think I've seen a lot of just altitude broadcasts for that one. Seen a lot of League Pass back when I was in college. I don't know if they've actually faced on national TV. And it's freaking hilarious because you think about how many MVPs Jokic and Giannis have combined for over the course of the past 6 years. 2019, it was Giannis. 2020, it was Giannis. 2021, it was Jokic. 2022 is Jokic. 2023 was Embiid. And 2024 was Jokic. So 5 of the last 6. And Giannis, for a lot of, like, he won a championship. Jokic then won 3 MVPs and a championship of his own. Great that Denver's now finally getting that matchup. It would be great. It would be great for sure. Ari, DM me after this. I've already had a couple of other people reach out to me about writing. DM me on the Twitter side of things, and we'll see if I can give you an answer on the writing side. Number 9, Sunday, March 9th. I think this is a statement game. Denver playing at Oklahoma City on ABC. I mentioned this earlier in the podcast. They'll play at Oklahoma City on March 9th and at Oklahoma City on March 10th. It's very weird, very odd scheduling, but I think that's one way to help with the back-to-back is just not allow there to be any travel. That's could be worse, but it'll be interesting to see if Denver gets caught at a weird time from a scheduling standpoint, or OKC gets caught at a weird time from a scheduling standpoint for that. Like, hypothetically, if Shea rolls an ankle the game before and then he has to miss both games against the Nuggets, same thing for Jamal or Nikola or whoever. Like, obviously, it would change those games dramatically. But I do think it'll be fascinating. March 9th, that's an ABC game. Obviously, those are premier settings. So that could be 1 versus 2 in the Western Conference at that point. It could be 1 versus 4. It could be 2 versus 5. It could be 3 versus 4. I don't know what it'll ultimately be, but Oklahoma City, I bet, is going to win probably 60 games. So if that's the case, then probably got to figure out how to beat them. But don't necessarily hold high expectations. Although if you're going to pick a game between the ABC game and the non-ABC game, to win versus OKC in early to mid-March, should probably pick the ABC game. And then Tuesday, April 1st, statement game versus Minnesota on TNT. That's the final one I have. I think that's going to be a big one. Actually, Denver did just face Minnesota on April 1st, I believe, this past year. And they've faced Minnesota multiple times. I think they faced them on April 10th of this last year, very late in the season. This one isn't as late, but it's still like pretty late if I go over to the schedule here. 82, 81, 80, 79, 78, 77, 76. It's game 76 on the calendar for Denver. And at that point, seeding will really start to figure it out. At that point, that's going to be really fascinating. So I think that the Nuggets will know who they are by that point, and Minnesota will know who they are by that point. I think Minnesota was very confident in who they were. They had plenty of opportunities for that. And I expect both of those teams to be in the top four once again. So should be really fascinating to see how the matchups break out. But that could be an opportunity to be the Northwest Division champions. It could be an opportunity to just avoid being in the 5th seed or whatever. So we will find out together. I'm very curious to see what actually happens. But folks, I think that's going to do it. I think that's going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll. Actually, Ari asked, what's your win prediction for the Nuggets? I don't have a... Actually, I'll do another question after that. I don't have a full-on win prediction. Before I was spitballing, I didn't actually make it for the actual schedule. I said 53 wins. I think now, looking at the schedule, I'd probably go with like 50. Because, look, Denver's not going to win as many games as they did last year. 57 wins was very high. There's a reason why it's the only time in Nuggets history between this and 2013 that they've actually done it. But it involved the rest of Denver's team being very healthy outside of Jamal Murray. And then the time where he wasn't healthy, Reggie Jackson actually played his best basketball. So it wasn't that bad. Denver, I don't think, is going to push as hard. I think that they are going to actively say we cannot push as hard if we want to have playoff success. This is a learning experience from this past year. And I think it will help them going forward, even if it was so painful in the moment. So I'm going to say 50, and I reserve the right to change because it's August 15th, and October 15th is probably the time when I'll come up with a final prediction for that. But yeah, Denver plays for the first game on October 24th, and there's plenty of time between now and then for them to figure it out, for us to see what ultimately happens for this team. I'm looking forward to it. And Josie says, any games you're not looking forward to? I actually skipped this part of the segment because, look, I want to be positive with this. I don't necessarily want to like put down the schedule or anything like that, or like entice people to not buy tickets. But there are games. I will say every Detroit game, every Charlotte game, every Portland is interesting because there's some, it's not really a rivalry anymore because of how much turnover there is, but they've got more young talent than they did before. The Houston games will be a root canal because that team tries really hard, and that's super annoying. The Chicago games are super boring unless Jokic just goes off and has like 30, 15, and 15. And then there are some games that I wouldn't necessarily recommend buying tickets to because I think that Denver could rest their guys for various ones. One of those that I'd really put is the February 8th game at Phoenix. I would say that's a 1-game road trip. I wouldn't expect Nikola Jokic to play on that one. And the January 4th game at San Antonio. That is a back-to-back, and it's a 1-game road trip as well. So keep in mind for that when you do buy tickets, when you're looking to buy tickets to Nuggets games, make sure, 1, there are no back-to-backs involved with your favorite players. You may not get to like see that with Jokic. Like sometimes like he may just rest a regular game because the team is going to have to rest him because he's carrying such a heavy burden. Injuries can always happen too. But also make sure that if you're looking to see a good game from the other team's side of things, make sure that they're not dealing with like the fifth game of a 7-game road trip or something like that. Or hypothetically, they're on the second night of a back-to-back, and then like it's the third back-to-back that they've had that month or something like that. So just be smart. Be smart is what I would say. Okay. That is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, folks. Really appreciate all the love and support on the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on the way out. If you have any other questions about the schedule, comment them below so that I know what to answer in the next show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hit that like button. We'll talk to you guys very soon.